Thanks to the events of the past 2 years, almost everyone on the planet understands what it means to suddenly have to change how we live our lives. Dr. Carolina Tropini had really only just set foot in her first leadership role as a researcher in a fairly new school in an entirely new city when the sudden shift happened for her. Of the 2.5 years she's been with UBC, nearly 70% has been spent working in a hybrid or entirely remote environment. We sat down to talk about her experience, her research, where our gut microbiome meets climate change, the lessons she's learned, and what's to come in her work. Welcome to SBME Interfaces.
So today we are interfacing with Dr. Carolina Tropini. She is an assistant professor in the School of Biomedical Engineering and the Department of Microbiology and Immunology at UBC. She received her PhD in biophysics at Stanford and also completed her postdoctoral studies there. She is the first Canadian recipient of the Johnson & Johnson Women in STEM 2D Scholars Award in the field of engineering. Last year, she was named a distinguished investigator by the Paul G. Allen Frontiers Group, providing each of 4 groups of researchers with $1.5 million US in funding over a 3-year period to pursue projects in health, disease, and technology, specifically in her particular field, which is in the gut microbiome. She is a staunch advocate of JEDI, which is Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, both in her lab and across SBME, being actively involved in our inaugural committees and initiatives. She is a gifted leader and mentor, a time management maven, which we can talk about a little bit later, a constant learner, a former beach volleyball player, and much more besides. Welcome, Carolina.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is my genuine pleasure. We briefly discussed this before, but there's a couple of areas I want to talk to you about today. One of the first ones is we are 2 years into a pandemic. You and I have talked a little bit before about how this situation has revealed inequities and things that need to be fixed, particularly in academia and in research as well. So in your own mind, what do you think we've learned?
Well, so when I think about the pandemic, I think the first image that comes to my mind was one of the first faculty meetings that I've been at, and that was kind of started during the pandemic, and the kids were at home and they were fighting, and I swear I had my mic off, but I didn't, and I had no idea because the kids were screaming and I was trying to push them away from the room, and by the time that I got back, my mic had been silenced and everyone had written, "We can hear you screaming." And that was one of those situations, when you kind of want to dig yourself. And fortunately on Zoom, you can just turn your video off and then you're in the hall by yourself. But I'm super privileged, right? Like, I have a space where I can be and be productive at work while being during the pandemic, and that's not true for everyone. The pandemic, I think, has been this extremely stressful time, and I think there have been lessons that have been learned, but I wish there had been more. In the sense that I think there's a lot of opportunities that almost got started. Like this whole hybrid thing, I think is not there yet, So I feel like there's a lot that we have learned. In some sense, like accessibility has really been improved in the way that everyone can access content in ways that before were not available. But at the same time, I taught a class last term, and we had this very finicky video that every once in a while, would go up and point at the ceiling, and so there's still work to be done, I think. Maybe you mean, was there something specific in terms of lessons learned in the pandemic? Like, do you mean scientifically or
anything really? Is there anything that you like? We talk about the hybrid aspect, and we talk about how there were certain people who were hit way harder than other people. Right? I too am one of those people who are privileged. Is there anything there that you hope maybe we take forward into whatever the new norm looks like when we eventually get there?
Yeah, one of the things that I think has been really fun is to work more easily with people around the world. In the sense that we had students from all over the world that started working remotely with us, and this allowed people that normally we may have not interfaced with to actually have them be part of our team. And it was the norm to, in fact still is, to communicate online, and so it didn't matter as much that maybe this person normally would have not been able to move to Canada for some amount of time. And so there's definitely barriers that have been broken thanks to the way that we've been bringing things online. But then there's, I've never seen it as much mental health issues in students as we have this year. This is something that I think it's really coming up. It's hard to be isolated and to start school without peers that you can talk to just because you're walking down to class together. And so those social aspects, I think, if we're not careful, may have a lasting impact as well.
Mm-hmm. So I always wonder about how this particular, like the COVID generation, will adapt in that situation. Like, what will they be better at that maybe we weren't before? But it's also that, right? Is the isolation aspect has really increased mental health in the workplace as well. There are going to be papers written about this for forever as we start to get out of it. So in discussing this, you have been as part of the school now for almost 3 years. You've been sitting in that chair for 2 very interesting of 3 years while, establishing your own lab and doing all that kind of work. So what have been some of the biggest challenges, the biggest wins? How do you feel? All that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, so I was lucky that we had 6 months before the pandemic started. So you're making me a little bit older than I'm actually am. It's 2.5 years.
2.5.
But yeah, so I think I'm really grateful that we got a chance to actually experience what normal looked like, and it may never come back. So it was fun to see the traveling, the interactions, and how things were like before moving into the isolation, and just the new opportunities also that came with the pandemic. And so I think one of the things that was tough was by the time that things shut down, from the perspective of our lab, we had just started getting our mouse lines going. We were there at the cusp of getting started on big experiments, and then close down everything, all the experiments. And then, sometimes you have senior faculty members that say like, oh, I never had so much time to write papers. And then I'm like, we have nothing to write on. We're so and so, but the thing that I'm super grateful about is that our group has been extremely resilient. People have learned very different skills to analyze different data sets, and you really see the courage and the stamina and the resilience of people kind of coming together. And we're now starting to write papers, and it's kind of amazing that these papers are entirely coming from a period of pandemic. And I think this is really a reflection of how good people have been at staying focused and at staying connected, and kind of making sure that we can still be productive. And so I feel extremely fortunate. In the past week, of giving a couple of talks, and kind of sometimes you hear yourself talking and you're kind of like, wow, this stuff is really awesome. And so it's that's pretty fun.
This is a really good segue, actually. Can you, for anybody out there who doesn't know, give a quick nutshell of your research? I find it endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So our lab studies the microbes that live in our gut, and these are really important entities that are a part of an entire ecosystem that is around and inside us. And so they make vitamins that we're not able to make. They break down the food that we otherwise wouldn't be able to digest. And one of the things that I think is pretty amazing about having them inside us is that anything that they produce is like a pill that we take by mouth. It just makes it through our entire system. And so our microbes can affect the function of our immune system as much as they can affect the function of our brain. And so there's a really incredible potential for precision medicine, because each one of us has a very different microbiota. So microbiota is kind of the collective term for these microbes. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, you talk so eloquently about the what I would call the comparative between our gut microbiota and climate change, and in particular things like dysbiosis events and stuff like that. I was wondering if you could speak to that as well. I think it's such a cool metaphor.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that is really fun in thinking that we harbor so many different microbes inside us is that it really is an ecosystem, and very complex, hundreds of different species. Everyone has their own agenda to be able to survive. And just like with global warming, we're seeing these changes in temperature affecting 1 million out of the 8 millions of animals that are being driven to extinction. Similarly, although it's a different time and length scale, when we have a fever or when we ingest drugs or when we may have a sickness, our physical environment changes inside us. So if you think about a fever, it's also a change in temperature of a couple of degrees. And the difference here is that, you're probably thinking about, well, the polar bears are being affected over a period of 20 years. And how does that relate to the gut? Well, in the gut, the fever may only last for, say, a couple of days, but the timescale of replication of these microbes is in the order of tens of minutes to hours. So for them, a fever that lasts a couple of days is not so different from the timescale of generation of the polar bears. And so whenever we have these changes in physical environment, the ecosystem is going to be changed. And so the thing that is really exciting about it is that it both gives us a chance to modify it to actually better our human health, but also gives us a lever to understand what is actually happening. A lot of the diseases end up being driven by the microbiota. And a lot of the things that we've changed through industrialization, say changed lifestyle, changed the way that we eat, will also affect the way that our ecosystem is functioning.
It's funny. So Aristotle was right. Wasn't he the one who said that if you want to deal with human health, go to the gut? So, yeah.
I think there was there was the famous no.
Or Hippocrates? Was it Hippocrates? It was Hippocrates? Yeah.
All diseases begin in the
That's excellent, though. That means that you are a part of a thousands-year-old tradition, which is pretty cool.
Why are we all like
Yeah. So what do you really hope to see happen in this particular research space? Like, what are the things you are pursuing? What really gets you excited?
The things that, over the long term, I see the microbiota as a way of really doing precision medicine in its core. So 10 years ago, there was a lot of excitement around our understanding of, even 20 years ago now, of the human genome and how that might affect the way that we do medicine, with the idea that everyone is different and everyone has different genes. And so everyone might need a different type of medical treatment that is personalized to themselves. The challenge, though, is that for important ethical reasons and also for practical reasons, we can't change human genomes. Our microbiota is been called our second genome, and it's much more malleable than our own genome. It also doesn't have all the ethical implications. There are, of course, some, but it's very different. If you change your microbiota, you're not changing your own genome. And so because it's so malleable and because it has so many different functions, so when we look at the number of genes that are present in our microbes, there's about 150 times more than the ones in our own human genome. Even though there's so little, together as a community, they have capabilities that we just can't even imagine. And so being able to actually know a person's microbiota, if they have a disease, we may be able to supply them with different microbes that will secrete drugs to ameliorate their disease at the right time. These microbes are extremely sophisticated in the way that they sense their environment. And so being able to tackle medicine and really leverage their importance to our health, as well as their flexibility to adapt to different environments is both a challenge because it's a very complex system, but I think has an incredible upside.
Absolutely. Wow. And so that's as you are a leader in this space, let's kick over to leadership then too. So you and I have had plenty of conversations about leadership, and I love learning from you. And what thank you. The biggest thing for me is you approach leadership as a learner, not as an expert. You approach leadership as something that you practice over time. So, and it's what makes you a great leader, I believe. So what kind of advice then do you have for either that grad student or that new PI that, sits in their lab, whatever it's going to be, and who have found themselves in a position of leadership now, where it's their job now to take care of people? Like, anything, anything at all?
Oh, you got that's a great question, and I think in some sense that, as you were saying, we learn leadership all the time, and so I don't think that in some sense you have to wait to be a PI or a senior graduate student to take on leadership. Is that, sometimes it's the small actions that really have an impact, and really leadership is kind of a matter of are you able to take something in your hands to change things or to improve systems, to improve methods. Like, even at the small scale of someone saying like, I will take care of ordering food for the lab. That is still taking leadership, even though it's on the scale of something that is local. And one of the things that I think it's sometimes hard to know is where do you want to have impact? And I think that's kind of how you can frame your own leadership, and at least how I frame my growth within leadership is kind of trying to realize what are the areas that I care about, and being able to lead change. If it's backed up by passion and by enthusiasm, then it's just part of everyday life. And there's also part of everyday life a lot of mess ups and a lot of learning. Absolutely, there's one of the fun things about, I think, being in academia is that we're always pushing frontiers, and with that come mistakes. So I think that learning kind of happens in every aspect.
You talk about that, about the hard work of trying to find out what it is you actually want to impact, what it is you want to be passionate about. What is it that you want to be passionate about and impact?
One of the things that I'm learning right now is that I need to narrow it down. One of the things that, to be honest, I was pretty burnt out last term, because I think it's easy to try to take too much on, and I feel like particularly right now during the pandemic, it's hard to find out the right limits on things, and so what I think I focus on, that where the areas that I care the most about, this I think has been true throughout, but people are what motivate me. Like I'm in science because I love working with people. I think that I love seeing people grow into scientists, and the science is kind of like the intellectually stimulating part, like the puzzles that we're trying to solve. But in the end, the things that I take home, I'm working from home, but still that I kind of take beyond the work, are my interactions with people. And so I guess like I want to be able to communicate the science that we're doing as much as I want to be able to. It's such a privilege and an honor to train the next generation of scientists. And sometimes I miss the bench science, kind of getting the eureka moment right from your own hands. But seeing people, come to my office like with this excitement of like having the discovery is it's incredible. And yeah, so what I'm hoping to cultivate more is more of that. And one of the great things is that if you surround yourself with great people, the great ideas just flourish. And I think that I've been lucky to find an incredible group of people to be working with.
Yeah, you know how to build a team. Having had the privilege of meeting some of your team, you know how to build a team.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the team has definitely built itself. So it's yeah.
I feel the best teams do, right? Good scientists attract good scientists, I think. Yeah. And so talk to me a little bit then about your leadership in another area, which is leadership and advocacy in the EDI space. You've been such a part of what we've been doing at SBME, what we're trying to do at SBME. I know we're just scratching the surface, but especially in science, like where do you hope we can improve? Where do you hope we can do better? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been kind of fascinating that happened at the same time of the pandemic is like this kind of realization of how much work we have to do in the realm of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I would add justice because somehow yes. It's a bit of a different thing too, right? That we have to make right by so many communities that have been mistreated, that have not been able to have a voice, and and that we need to amend these mistakes and make sure that as we move forward in science, that everyone feels welcome, heard, and supported. And so I guess like some of the work that that I think that can be done at the university, and it's been really amazing to see how much passion and how much involvement there's been from people throughout the community, is to really try to make a change in that direction. And so one of the things that I'm involved with right now is I'm co-chairing the Indigenous Engagement Committee and for SBME, and so working with people, and there's so much learning that needs to happen. You know, one of the things that I kind of realized with EDI is that I often feel like I stumble on my words, and there's so much learning to do, and you know that this is an area in which I feel like there's a lot of growth that is happening, and I want to see more people that put themselves out there and make themselves be uncomfortable to make things better. And I really see people that are really stepping up in these positions and that are driving these changes. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done, you know, from the Indigenous engagement perspective. We need to decolonize the university. There's so much that needs to be done. And there's a lot of history that you know, within Canada that we need to come to terms with, and we need to amend. And so that there's an incredible amount of work, but there's also it's a real movement, and it's pretty incredible to be part of this and be part of the learning and hopefully be part of the change.
This is why I like talking to you about this too. Is something you said at the beginning. Is it hurts. It sucks to look at this stuff, right? And so it requires courage. It requires the knowledge that you're going to screw up. You're going to put your feet in your mouth, and then you're going to have to come back and learn more, because that's the job, I guess, is the best way to put it, right? As a human being, that's the job. So that's one of those things where I wish we could normalize that discomfort in it, because normalizing the discomfort will lead us to that very rich data source of making those mistakes and learning on the other side of it. So yeah, I'm very glad about the work you're doing, and SBME needs more of that, very much so. I want to tilt back to something you said before, where you were talking about how that sort of sense of overwhelm that you had last term, you know, taking too much on. I just wanted to tell you, it isn't just you. This is a big another sort of pandemic. During the pandemic, is so many people, because we're at a distance for some weird reason, we're saying yes to too much, and we're taking on too much, and there has yet to be a single person, in whether it's student or staff or faculty, it doesn't matter who hasn't said like, oh, there's a lot, we're doing a lot right now. So it's so you're not alone, and any students and faculty out there, you're not alone either. So yes, have this conversation.
Well, it's one part of, I think, that in some sense, I hope that we'll learn from the pandemic. It's whatever is going to be the new normal, is that we'll be able to slow down. And I feel like the pandemic has given us a disservice, because by working from home, there's no breaks in between meetings. You know, classes will run not 50 minutes, they'll run 60 minutes. And we don't have, like, I feel like that's the mistake of humans trying to be more efficient, and in practice we just do more. We're not more, like, we are more efficient, but in practice it just means that we drive ourselves through the ground more. And you know, I don't have, unfortunately, a good answer for that, except for mindfully thinking and making sure that we slow down practically. But it's easy to fall into that loop that is like, oh, like now I can use 100% of my time doing things, and that's just not how our biology works. We're not routed to.
You're very right. We are not wired for that. And on that note, like, what came to your rescue when you were like, oh, this is too much, I'm at too much right now? Like, do you have any like time management hacks that you used that you could, you know, tell everybody out there?
Yeah, you know, I'm a very strong proponent of time management, just not really from the perspective of having things organized, but mostly to know that you're prioritizing what's important to you. If you don't make your own prioritizations, someone else will do it for you. There's just so much stuff to do that someone else will impose their view of how things should go on you. And so if you prioritize what you want to do, and then you make sure that it happens, you're making your schedule and you're managing your own time such that you can actually achieve what's important to you. And this is true from achieving your work stuff as much as it is if exercise is important to you. If you don't schedule it in, it will not happen. And so the, kind of making sure that we protect our time for things that are important to us is particularly right now, one of the few ways in which you can ensure that your time doesn't get stolen away.
Absolutely. This will probably be connected then to this next question here. If you could tell your 20-year-old self anything, give that young Carolina Tropini advice, what would it be?
That's the hard question. One of the things that I find that has been interesting about my career path is that, or I guess maybe not even career, like when I was a kid, I really wanted to study animal behavior, and I would spend hours observing birds in the backyard. And neither one of my parents completed university, and so we were kind of the first generation to actually be able to attend and complete university, and was kind of a big deal. And when I was little and kind of doing these sightings of animals and studying ethology, kind of as a hobby more than anything. But my grandpa told me, that you're the first generation that has an opportunity. You better take advantage of it. And studying animal behavior is not going to be, we've worked so hard to get you to actually have these opportunities, that you should do something that is going to be useful for humans and for the community that has supported you to come here. And I took that very strongly to heart. I kind of dropped all of the studying the animal behavior, and I went into a career that I thought it would take me to actually having an impact on human health. And my 20-year-old self was so focused on kind of going in this direction and having this kind of impact. And it wasn't until a few years back that when I kind of realized that actually somehow I managed to bridge both things. The bacteria and the viruses, the communities that we study in our gut are no different from the animals that I was observing. It's just the skills are different. I think what I probably would tell my 20-year-old self is to realize more about the interconnectivity that we all have. I feel like a little bit, there's been a period of my life in which I lost that sense of kind of wonder, of magic, that sometimes as scientists we kind of distance ourselves from, because we try to have things that are very clearly delineated and quantified, but there's still magic because things are so beautiful. The way that things work, it's so complex and yet it's so robust. Mm-hmm. And so kind of reminding ourselves of the beauty of the things that we study, I think is something that should not be forgotten.
Oh my God, that's profound. Ray Bradbury once said that you should always leave time for poetry in the day, for very much that reason. Like the kind of language that kicks you out of your routine and makes you see magic and wonder again, right? Yeah, well said, Carolina. Okay, then one last question then. So is there any specific initiative or project or endeavor that you're overseeing right now that you are really excited about and you feel that we should get excited about too?
Just one. Well, one thing that I'm really excited about is that I think I'm allowed to talk about this. We may have to cut this out if we're not, but the big CFREF on innovation and kind of bioengineering. How can we involve bioengineering in human health? That's something that I think is really, really exciting. So this is being led by Kelly McNagney, and as far I'm part of the team with Anna Blankley and Peter Zanstra and Michael Murphy are on it as well as Pauline Johnson. And it's been just really fun to come up with new ideas and think really big about what are ways in which we can we can make UBC a hub for these new technologies and really have a large impact while including EDI principles and thinking really broadly. So it's been really fun.
Oh, that's the stuff that excites me about biomedical engineering is kind of everything is a moonshot now. You know what I mean? Like we have the opportunity to think that big. We have the opportunity to go far afield and try things we've never tried before. This is it's very exciting. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, Carolina. I am always in awe of you, and I love learning from you. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much.